Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What is the scariest thing you have heard at night while sleeping in your bed? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Not traditionally my bed, but I was camping with a friend sharing a tent. It was well up north where his parents have a trailer. We decided to set the tent up on the wooden deck because the ground is very Canadian shield rocky. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling a complete and utter deep down terror, like I've never felt this sort of instinctual fear in my life. It took me a second before I realized I was hearing heavy footsteps and claws on the deck, as something was walking around our tent. Hearing the sounds it was making, it was clearly a bear. To make things worse, I'm a tall guy, and it's a small tent. I was sleeping in such a way that my head was pushed up against the canvas side. I was frozen with fear as the bear came over and started sniffing at my head through the canvas, to the point where every few sniffs he would bump the top of my head with his snout. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably like 15 seconds, I heard him start moving away, get to the end of the deck, and hop down onto the gravel driveway and pad off. There have been a few black bear incidents in and around the area, so I figure it was probably just one of them, but still, getting nuzzled awake by a bear is not the best. Heard footsteps on the concrete staircase outside our front door at about 11 p.m. one summer night, followed by someone rattling at the door. This was when I grabbed a knife from my desk and got ready to defend myself. Anyway, while I waited for the door to break, I heard the same footsteps again, this time walking downstairs. I stayed awake for about 2 hours after. My neighbor found screwdriver marks on his front door the next morning, and another one a few streets over actually had his house invaded 3 weeks later. Before my husband and I were married, we lived for a while in his childhood home. He's the owner, but has let his uncle live there because he doesn't have anywhere else to go. That house has 2 different entrances and is like 2 smaller houses inside. We lived in one and uncle lived in the other. One night, around way past midnight, I woke up to banging sounds and the house was kind of shaking. I was scared shitless. We got up to find out what's going on, and we found his uncle trying to tear down a part of the roof. He thought the roof was damaged. It wasn't. He just gets some weird ideas stuck in his head sometimes, and he tied a hammer to a long log and banged it to remove the damaged part, as he put it. I didn't know whether I wanted to laugh or cry at that moment. Got into bed exhausted, didn't realize I fell asleep instantly. Next thing I know, I'm down the side of my bed on all fours saying she's not real. Looked up and over my bed and saw this old hag banshee type thing staring at me. Immediately woke up, didn't move, didn't realize I couldn't move at first, but glanced to my left. There she was, mouth opened, and let out this scream with no sound, but felt like a force hit my body, and my body sort of vibrate as it hit. She then disappeared. Then I was able to move again. First episode of sleep paralysis I ever had. Someone fumbling keys and banging on my apartment door while yelling. I found out the next day from the doorman that someone had come home drunk and got off the elevator on the wrong floor and thought my apartment was his. I read a pretty good amount of these stories on a pretty regular basis, and I hear this happen pretty regularly. Has this ever happened to you or anyone you know? I remember about a month sleeping in my car. I was snoozing when I heard that horrible animal fight break out. It was pretty dark, but it looked like a coyote and something I couldn't see were having a gnarly scrap. Bonked myself on the headliner, waking up to a war outside my window. Our parents were gone overnight when we 3 kids were in high school or college. I woke up to a male voice talking outside the bedroom window. Kind of freaked out and woke up my sister so she could freak out with me. Male voice still talking and now knocking on the window. Finally, the male voice says, "Come on, brother's name, let me in." Realized one of our brother's friends was out there and was too drunk to knock on the right bedroom window. Had to wake up brother to go fetch his friend. This happened recently. I was laying in my bed at midnight because I couldn't sleep. I was watching some YouTube. While I was watching YouTube, I heard scratching noises on my window from outside. I believe in ghosts and I'm not easily scared, so I asked it, "Could you stop that please?" And right before I said, and I heard someone laughing from the other side like, "Hee hee." I told my mom what happened, and she said she also heard scratching noises from her window that day, but the noises stopped when my mom heard me go to the bathroom. We think that someone was trying to break in because every window the scratching noise came from was a little bit broken, and it couldn't be a friend because I don't have any friends. I woke up to screaming. I put on pants and grabbed my phone. I ran down the stairs faster than I've ever ran. There was a man and a woman standing in the front of the bottom of my stairs. I called 911. The woman was holding a brand new baby. Still had the hospital tags and mom too. Dude was hitting himself in the head with a rock. I told her to leave. She was like, "He's gonna kill himself." And I said, "Leave now. You and your newborn baby don't need to see this. Leave now." She left. He continued hitting himself in the head with a rock, trying to kill himself. There was blood, hair, and brain matter on the ground. He dropped the rock and headed towards a huge, busy street. He didn't look and walked across the street, all the while saying nothing. I followed him up until the street. The police finally arrived. He'd passed out on the sidewalk on the other side of the street. 2-ish days later, the police blockaded our apartment complex and I couldn't take my boy to school. They instructed everyone to stay inside. Later, we found out he shot the woman and killed her, then killed himself. They were found because the baby was crying and the neighbor called the police. They also found 3 bodies, 2 in the dumpster and 1 behind the building. I wasn't asleep, but it all felt like a bad dream. When I was younger, around 13, I played paintball and kept my paintball gear in my bedroom closet. I was sleeping, and for some reason, the regulator on my fully filled 68 CI 4500 PSI nitrogen tank pretty much exploded and started making crazy noises. Also, another terrifying aspect of this moment was because all the nitrogen was rushing out, it was blowing out of the cracks in the folding doors. A cool, forceful breeze was just hitting me in the face in the pitch black. I pretty much just froze and thought a portal to the underworld had opened in my closet. When I was little, my family went to stay at a national park for a few nights. My brother and I were in our own little hut by the lake. My brother sleepwalks, so my mom locked us in at night just in case. I woke up to deep grunting sounds, which then grew into deafeningly loud honks on all sides. There was a loud thump to my left, and the hut shook, followed by more thumps and shaking. My mom called over to see if we were okay, and to let us know that a family of hippos had come out of the lake and one was scratching itself on our hut. Soon after, they made their way off into the night. My brother slept through the whole thing. I was working in one camp next to a river along a grisly travel corridor. It was surrounded by an electrified fence at night to keep the bears out, but my tent was next to it, and I could hear them rustling around there circling the camp at night. Different camp, this one a massive building in the Arctic. I was woken up of my first nights to the fire alarm, a big flashing red light, and the sound of probably 100 fire doors clanging shut. I had to throw on enough clothes in case we had to evacuate outside, then figure out how to get the muster station with all the lights pulsing red and closed fire doors every 20 meters or so in the hallways, making everything look completely different. Woke up in my apartment, where I lived alone with no pets, to a huge crash from my living room. I went out there and found my entire tea set and the shelf they were on had somehow flown out of my bookshelf and landed on the floor. It was a bit hard to go back to sleep after that one. Live downtown in a mid-sized city, 7 years now. Dog barking, and when I looked outside, it was a man on all fours in the parking lot scratching himself bloody. Girl yelling, "Help, help, help!" And when I looked out, she was pulled into a car. Yes, I called the police and gave description. Fell asleep in my basement. Heard some light rustling outside the window when I got up. No one was there, but they had clearly wiped a bunch of dirt away from the outside glass to peer in. Transformer exploded one time right outside, about shit my goddamn jammies. During the 2020 protests, I watched the city burn in real time. Cars on fire, glass breaking, gunshots, people fighting. My very quiet cat just runs back from the window one time and starts meowing incessantly and staring. Still can't explain that one. I sometimes get sleep paralysis when I'm super depressed or stressed out. I went to bed one night, rolled over, and saw this thing clinging to my curtains with its head backwards. I somehow managed to get the strength to break out of it, and quickly turned to face my mirror. And the thing was in the reflection, still clinging to my curtains, and looking at me. Was in uni, staying in student halls. My corridor obviously has a main door which is locked, and no one else was staying in the other rooms over the weekend. went to bed, heard a noise, woke up, and the corridor sensor lights turned on. I waited for a bit, then I swear someone was outside my door. Shit me up, I hid under the covers. About a week before I moved away from Oregon, a loud bang woke me up really early in the morning. Didn't know what it was and nothing else was happening. Fell back asleep. Woke up to flashing police lights. Turns out a dude was shot and killed next to our house. 2 bullets to the dome. Died instantly. Bruv, one time I woke up in the middle of the night and across my room was a chair with a jacket hanging around the back, a box on the seat of the chair, and a basketball on top of that box. But when I woke up, I obviously didn't have my glasses on, and it was dark, so I thought there was a man sitting in the chair, and I never screamed so loud in my life. Someone running down the hall, several crashes, then crying. My sister experienced sleep paralysis, and when she could move again, she jumped out of bed, ran out of her room to our parents' room, but she slammed into the shelf in the hallway, sending everything flying. She was okay, just crying out of fear and confusion. She slept on our parents' floor for the rest of the night. Fire alarm. The hotel was actually on fire. I and a bunch of others spent some hours outside while the fire was put out and safety checks. My room was at the lucky end of the hotel. Wind. I used to work a 5-hour drive away, so I stayed in a caravan, in a campsite, on the top of a hill. There was a storm. The gusts of wind would come through the trees, making a heck of a racket, and you'd anticipate it hitting the caravan and hope it didn't get tipped over. All night. 3. My ear. I'm a side sleeper. Sometimes my ear folds over in my sleep. It's absolute agony when it unfolds when I move my head in the morning and the blood starts moving through it again. It subsides after 15 minutes. The scary thing, sometimes I wake up and realize it has happened before I move my head, then I lie there anticipating the sheer agony I'm about to endure. My first experience with sleep paralysis actually. I was peacefully sleeping, and then I kind of woke up, but not really. I could move my eyes, but my eyelids were closed. I heard a faint breathing right next to my ear. I was so scared I tried to scream as loud as I could, but nothing happened. It was absolutely terrifying, thinking there was someone or something really close to me, and I could do nothing. I hadn't been introduced to the concept of sleep paralysis at the time, so I genuinely thought I could have died. The same night, when I was only going to bed, I heard somebody scream outside. But that was most likely just my imagination since I had not slept for a day. Had my first hypnagogic hallucination a couple of weeks ago, was super sleep deprived, lying in bed, and I look up at the ceiling to see Gollum up there, clinging to it like a frog. I knew immediately that this was a hallucination because it seemed like the exact type of thing my brain would conjure to torture itself. Not the LOTR character I was hoping to see in my bedroom, not even close. Well, if you had to hallucinate a Lord of the Rings character, Gollum would be low on my list. Who would you choose? I might go with Gimli. There are some woods on the north side of my house, and my window faces north. Because of this, I have discovered that there's a kind of owl that makes a long, drawn-out scream that is definitely not human, and that foxes have a vocalization that sounds like a noise a human could definitely make, but probably wouldn't do so in that rhythm. Both sounded really freaky when I first heard them, but I wasn't scared as I might have been because I could tell it was coming from the woods, and most likely just an animal. I also found out what raccoons sound like, but that was more annoying than scary because it sounded like at least 3 of them, and they would not shut up. When I was little, I woke up in the middle of the night to a very tall, featureless figure standing in my doorway. It was a completely opaque pitch black and taller than the doorframe. The night light from the bathroom, despite giving off enough light for me to see the figure, didn't reflect off it or interact with it at all. It looked like a disproportionate silhouette or shadow. I just stared at it for a few seconds, then blinked, and it was gone. For years, I just figured it was one of my parents coming to check on me, as at least one of them did that every night when my brother and I were little. I realized a few years ago, though, that they were unlikely because 1, neither of my parents are anywhere near that tall, and 2, my door was left open for the rest of the night. It was one of my parents, and my sleepy brain just imagined them that tall. They would have closed the door after checking on me. I've chosen to believe that this was a paranormal experience since this realization. I know some people don't believe in that, but I choose to believe it's simply because it's much easier to stomach than the alternative. If it wasn't a shadow figure or a ghost of some sort, the only other logical explanation I can think of is there was some random person in my house that night there. So when I was younger, I had a walkie-talkie on which I had fun talking with my neighbor to laugh and play spies. During one night, I heard the noise of the walkie-talkie which is activated, which woke me up, but I laughed. I was thinking that it was probably my neighbor who was playing a joke on me. It wasn't him at all. It was two very deep male voices responding to each other in a monotonous tone in a foreign language. I was really scared. Without knowing why, in a burst of courage, I simply replied with, "Who is it?" The only answer I got was in my language, "Cut off contact," and I heard nothing more. Afterwards, I decided to hide this walkie-talkie in a box without ever telling anyone about it. Even today, it is still in the same box. I was sleeping over at my brother's place, and it started to storm really loudly. He was sat up on the couch, and I was on the floor on a blow-up mattress. I grew up terrified of the dark, but he couldn't sleep with any lights on, so at one point, I pulled the bed next to the couch and slept close, so I couldn't see underneath it. Felt like something was going to grab me. I was in a fog, ready to drift off, and lightning cracked and the sky lit up the room. I opened my eyes to find an effing hand inches from my nose. I screamed and scared the shit out of both of us. He was so confused at me being so close, he couldn't get up to try to run away. Instead, his feet swung over and landed on me, laughing myself to tears. He left the bathroom light on for me after that. Decades ago, long before Jurassic Park ever came out, there were a few times I woke up, or was already awake, chronic insomnia, and in the wee hours of the morning, while the entire neighborhood was dark and quiet, heard that deep thump that preceded the appearance of the T-Rex in the movies. Thump. Thump. It would go on for a few minutes before stopping, and it always terrified me. I had no idea what it could be, but the noise had a very primal effect on me. Then years later, I saw Jurassic Park in the theater and heard the same damn noise with the approach of the T-Rex. The cold shock of recognition made me sick to my stomach. Whatever the noise I heard was, it was too damn similar for comfort to a gigantic predator approaching. Never want to hear it again. Hearing a sound versus seeing a thing unleashes that true primal fear, so that must be pretty wild. Cool. I had the flu during high school. I was getting irritated that night because I was wide awake, felt like shit, and still couldn't tire myself out enough to doze off. I laid down, yet again hoping to futilely fall asleep. 2 seconds after I closed my eyes, I felt my body levitating up off the bed. I felt a whoosh of my sheets brushing my legs as I rose up. I'm a side sleeper, so it was very obvious my arms were dangling in empty air instead of against my pillow. You would think this insane event would make me open my eyes, but I was scared shitless that I'd be face to face with something evil or creepy. I did not want to face whatever that was. As my body rose higher, I started thinking, oh shit, is this thing going to slam me against the ceiling? Eventually, whatever entity that had lifted me up slowly lowered me back down into the bed.